Welcome students. In today's class, I will be discussing the Salt March and the civil disobedience movement. Students, here civil disobedience movement means the civilians of Indian subcontinent will disobey the Britishers, the British administration, the British rule. In that way, there will be a movement, and it was launched by Mahatma Gandhi. So on 31st January 1930, Mahatma Gandhi sent a letter to Viceroy Irwin stating 11 demands. Some of these were of general interest, others were specific demands of different classes, from industrialists to peasants. The idea was to make the demands wide-ranging so that all classes within Indian society could identify with them and everyone could be brought together in a united campaign. A campaign against the British. The most daring of all was the demand to abolish the salt tax. Now, why salt tax? Because Mahatma Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. And salt was something consumed by the rich and the poor alike, and it was one of the most essential items of food. The tax on salt and the government monopoly, that means only the British could produce the salt, no one else, over its production. So this is the reason why Mahatma Gandhi chose salt. Mahatma Gandhi's letter was, in a way, an ultimatum. If the demands were not filled by 11 March, the letter stated the Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign in the entire subcontinent controlled by the British. So Irwin was unwilling to negotiate. Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. The march was over 240 miles from Gandhi Ashram in Sabarmati to Gujarat coastal town of Dandi. The volunteers walked for 24 days, about 10 miles a day. Thousands came to hear Mahatma Gandhi wherever he stopped, and he told them what he meant by Swaraj and urged them to peacefully defy the British, to peacefully protest against the British by disobeying. On 6th April, he reached Dandi and ceremonially violated the law manufacturing salt by boiling seawater. This marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. Now, the question arises, how was this movement different from the non-cooperation movement that we discussed before? In this movement, people were asked to refuse to cooperate with the British, as they had done in 1922, but also to break colonial laws. This is the difference between non-cooperation and civil disobedience. Thousands in different parts of the country broke the salt law, manufactured salt, and demonstrated in front of the government salt factories. As the movement spread, foreign clothes was boycotted and liquor shops were picketed, means closed, asked to close. Peasants refused to pay revenue and chokidar taxes. Village officials resigned, and in many places forest people violated forest laws, going into reserve forest to collect wood and bridge. Worried by the developments, the colonial government began arresting the Congress leaders one by one. And this led to violent clashes in many places. Abdul Ghaffar Khan was arrested in April 1930, and his arrest angered the crowds. They demonstrated in the street of Peshawar, facing armed cars and police firing. Many people were killed. A month later, when Mahatma Gandhi himself was arrested, industrial workers in Solapur attacked police posts, municipal buildings, law courts, and railway stations. All structures that symbolized British were demolished. The frightened government responded with a policy of brutal repression. Peaceful satyagrahis were attacked, women and children were beaten, and about 1 lakh people were arrested. In such a situation, Mahatma Gandhi once again decided to call the movement and entered into a pact with Irving on 5th March 1931. And by this Gandhi-Irving pact, Gandhiji consented, means supported in participating in a roundtable conference. Remember, the Congress had boycotted the first roundtable conference. And the government agreed to release the political prisoners. In December 1931, Gandhiji went to London for the conference, but the negotiation broke down and he returned disappointed. Back in India, when he came back in India, he discovered the government had begun a new cycle of repression. That means they started to control the Indian movement in a new way. Ghaffar Khan and Jawaharlal Nehru both were in jail. The Congress been declared illegal and series of measures had been imposed to prevent meetings, demonstrations and boycotts. With great apprehension, Mahatma Gandhi relaunched the civil disobedience movement. For over a year, the movement continued, but by 1934, it lost its momentum.